May I have roll call, please?
Commissioner Knudsen?
Here.
Commissioner Monette?
Here.
Commissioner Pont?
Here.
Vice Chair Hardy?
Here.
Chair Kistner?
Here. Next item is a public forum. This is an opportunity for the public to address the Commission on items of interest to the public that are not listed on the agenda. Because of restrictions imposed by the Brown Act, the Commission may not engage in discussion or take action on any matters not described on this agenda. Please observe the time limit of 3 minutes. I'll open public comment. Is there any public comment? Close public comment. The consent items. Members of the Commission or the public may ask that any item be considered individually for purposes of considering alternative action, for extended discussion, or for public comment. Unless this is done, one motion may be used to adopt all recommended actions. The first one is a request by Gary Finnan on behalf of Charles Krug Winery for design review, exemption approval in order to construct a new 260-square-foot outdoor pavilion on Charles Krug property located at 2800 Main Street in the Winery District.
Okay, I'd like to pull that.
All right, we'll pull that one. Second one. I don't have 4.2 on my agenda here. Thank you. 4.2 is an administrative determination finding that the retail store gathered may operate under the existing permit for 1327 Main Street in the Central Business District, as it qualifies a continuing use and remains consistent with the established allowances and restrictions of the existing permit. And 4.3 is approval of the minutes for September the 5th. Do I have a motion to approve items 4.2 and 4.3?
Move the consent agenda with the one pull.
That's correct. 4.1 has been pulled. Bobby pulled it.
Oh, second. Did you make that motion? Yeah. Okay. Yeah,
Roll call.
Commissioner Pont?
Yes.
Commissioner Monette?
Yes.
Commissioner Knudsen?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hardy?
Yes.
Chair Kistner?
Yes. All right. So, we'll have a discussion on 4.1.
Yeah, you do your thing.
Sure. I'll give a brief staff report. So as a little background, the Charles Krug Winery was established in 1861 and is the oldest continually operating winery in Napa Valley. According to the city's municipal code, any winery and its accessory and related uses existing as of June 25th, 1979 are deemed to be permitted uses. As such, many of the uses and activities currently occurring on the Krug Winery site are considered to be existing non-conforming. Since 1979, staff is aware of 2 use permits that have been granted to Krug, allowing additional uses beyond those historically established. That would be use permit 200602, which allowed for the establishment of a deli and recognized that both the first and second floors of the carriage house could be used for assembly uses, special events specifically. This also allowed for a entry road widening and also some associated signage. The second use permit is an amendment, and that's 200838, and it seems repetitive as it allows the expansion of assembly uses and special events on the second floor of the carriage house, which was already permitted in the original use permit. So that one doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But the proposed approximately 260 square foot new outdoor structure would be an open pavilion style with an underground or an under-counter refrigerator, sink, and space to accommodate a mobile pizza oven that is currently used as part of existing approved food service on site. The proposed structure would have a maximum height of approximately 14 feet 3 inches at its peak and would be located at the center of a nearly 138-acre site. The structure would be finished with stucco and covered in stone siding, cedar posts, and framing, and a corrugated metal roof to match the existing chateau on site. The outdoor pavilion is considered incidental and accessory to ongoing and historical permitted food preparation and service, as well as events that are recognized at the winery. Consistent with the ag land use designation, the property has a zoning designation of winery. This district provides for winery and wine-related uses within the agricultural general plan land use designation. Any winery and its accessory and related uses existing as of June 25th, 79, as I already stated, are permitted in the winery district. And accessory buildings and structures, including gazebos, patio covers, and other uses and structures which are customarily incidental and subordinate to the permitted and conditional uses, are permitted in the winery district. Staff finds that the proposed outdoor pavilion raises no substantial design problems and therefore recommends that the Planning Commission determine that the project is exempt from the requirements of CEQA pursuant to Section 15303 and approve a resolution finding that the project is exempt from design review and approve the new outdoor pavilion located at 2800 Main Street. I would be happy to try and answer any questions you may have at this time. The applicant is here if you have any questions of them as well.
Well, I was just wondering, I noticed, I already talked to Noah about this, there are trees on there, but he said there aren't going to be any trees that are removed or anything. I was just wondering, is this open ground right now?
Yes, it's grass.
It's going to be open ground that's going to be covered.
Yep.
And so I'm just wondering if there's, if there's any thought to runoff when it's really raining, and, and the idea of all the floods of taking up open ground in areas is thought not to be.
It's a vast open space surrounded by grass. Public Works Department had no issues with drainage or stormwater runoff.
And also then, how close are restrooms to this pavilion? Are they?
You'll have to ask.
I assume that there's no restroom. Yeah.
Not in the outdoor pavilion. No, it's more like a gazebo.
Yeah, I was just wondering that.
Yeah, the applicant may be able to answer that for you.
Yeah.
Planner Heacock, I wonder if we could hear from the applicant. I'd love to just get his or her view of the proposed change.
Uh-oh.
Good evening. With regards to the bathroom, there are bathrooms probably 30 feet away from in the main historic building. Really, this is just an extension of formalising something that the Pizza on the Lawn program that's been running for the last few years, and it's just formalising the use of that so that it makes it more efficient with food service and ties it in architecturally to the historic building. It's relatively simple.
So right now you're serving these pizzas out of the permitted delicatessen?
And the pizza oven is outside under a temporary gazebo, which is an existing large format wood burning stove.
So you're serving them from the gazebo?
Yes, they're prepared in the existing kitchen, and all of the prepared goods are brought out and they're finished in the wood burning oven.
But you're actually serving them from the gazebo?
Yes.
You're charging people there, you're collecting the funds there?
No, that's done inside.
Okay.
So basically someone will come up, they will get a ticket, they'll come outside, and they will pick up their pizza.
Okay.
At the moment, currently,
so this would be pickup only?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Why would you need a grill for pickup only?
For other events, for for example, prepping toppings, grilled vegetables, stuff like that. So this
is above and beyond what you do and have already?
There is an existing on site. On the other side, there is a barbecue. So the grill is a barbecue. It's not a functioning kitchen grill. It's a barbecue grill. Just to clarify. Thank you.
I do have some questions.
Oh, you have some
for staff, though.
Okay. Anyone else have questions of the applicant? As staff, John?
Yeah. Let me just start with probably an easy one. The CEQA analysis, you call out 15303, and then you sort of quote 15303E, including garages, carports, patios, swimming pools, and fences. Did you mean 15303E as the source of your exemption?
I don't have the CEQA guidelines in front of me, but that would be my guess, correct?
Okay. The earlier resolution actually tags 15303C, which has to do with restaurants or similar of less than 2,500 square feet. I suggest your exemption might want to be 15303C and not 15303E.
The resolution just referenced.
Construction of small structures, and that I think is so. I still think that's budget. Yeah.
I don't have. Sorry, I don't have any CEQA guidelines in front of me, but I think that.
Sorry, I think so. You're saying that E is new construction of small structures, and
Well,
C is
Let me read
is
E.
restaurants.
Accessory appurtenant structures including garages, carports, patios, swimming pools, and fences. I would suggest two things. One, this is not an appurtenant structure as used in the art because it's like and similar to what has already been approved. There's no difference between it and the current deli.
Okay.
Okay, that makes it not an appurtenant structure. An appurtenant structure is usually considered subsidiary to the main structure. For example, a bus stop would be appurtenant to a apartment complex, but the apartment complex would not be appurtenant to the bus stop.
Okay. Does that exemption not say small structures?
No, it does not.
Okay.
Accessory appurtenant structures. I read the entire
Okay.
section to
Okay.
you. However, C says store, motel, office, restaurant, or other similar structure not involving the use of significant amounts of hazardous substances, blah-de-blah-de-blah-de, not exceeding 2,500 square feet in floor area, which was the exemption used in the earlier resolution for the delicatessen approval. I would suggest for the sake of consistency and probably correctness, you want to use C, not E.
Okay.
Next question. How is this accessory or appurtenant to the previous permit for the delicatessen? It does the same thing as the delicatessen.
I don't think it's specific to the delicatessen. I think it's specific to ongoing operations at the winery, which include full-service kitchen, food preparation, events, etc. So, I mean, this is an outdoor open pavilion that has a space that can accommodate a mobile pizza oven. Other than that, it's simply an outdoor structure.
It seems to me it does the same thing as the delicatessen, basically. It's an expansion of the deli. And under Resolution 2008-38, it actually calls for, provided that any change or use and expansion of the winery shall require a use permit. So I would suggest that this might not be exempt in the fashion in which you approach it. I understand where you're coming from, but I would think it might be cleaner given the previous resolutions, given this is an expansion of square feet of the deli, basically. I recognize it's separate from the deli, but in action, activity, and effect, it's an expansion of the deli, that it should be treated as if it is a change in the existing use permit and not exempt as an appurtenant structure, which I don't believe in the term of art it would be.
Staff found this to be an extension of the existing commercial kitchen which serves the deli. We did not find it to be an expansion of the existing use because they are currently serving pizzas. The deli square footage is not expanding. The number of seats in the deli is not expanding. It's, from the staff perspective, an alternative method of providing the existing service. Of course, the commission is free to have a different perspective on that issue, but that is how the staff looked at this application, reviewed it under design review, and brought it forward for a recommendation of approval.
Okay. I can understand where you're coming from, but I hope you can understand where I'm coming from. I'm looking at a resolution of approval for 627 square feet. This is a 260 square foot addition, which is 41%. If Safeway came in and said, I want a 41% expansion, that wouldn't be exempt. We would make them go through a use permit process. And I notice here the drawing you delivered to us has the deli at 481 square feet and the commercial kitchen at 1,221 square feet. And I'm kind of wondering where the 627 square feet number in the resolution actually comes from and what it includes.
This exhibit was provided by the applicant, so they're free to provide some additional information regarding how they determine the square footage. It's staff's understanding that both the cucina and the commercial kitchen are used in the preparation of food, and the food is consumed in the other area that's not highlighted, but I would ask, is that correct? So the cucina and the commercial kitchen identified on that exhibit are not where people sit and eat. That's where the food's prepared.
I also noticed that the resolution 206-02, the one that includes the 627 square foot for the delicatessen, also reads that granting the use permit would not set a precedent for the approval of similar uses whose incremental effect could be blah, 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 blah. So, in other words, we've got two previous resolutions that say all changes need to be by use permit, and that the granting of the 620 square foot would not set a precedent for the approval of similar uses. So I would think, given those two resolutions, given what's already been approved, given the fact that this is not an appurtenant use, at least in my opinion, that this needs to step through the use permit process, which might also give us the opportunity to clean up the difference between 481 square feet and 627 square feet. And in what resolution does the commercial kitchen appear? Neither of those seem to. You don't know either.
It's not identified in any resolution because the existing winery use has been in operation prior to the requirement for use permits for many of the existing activities that are occurring on the site.
Okay, so the commercial kitchen was pre-existing grandfathered use.
Based on the limited information available to staff.
Okay. But I've got no particular animus towards the project. This is once again a process concern. That changes of this nature that expand an existing use, because the existing deli sells pizzas, this will sell pizzas, ergo it's an expansion, not an appurtenant use, should step through the use permit process. I certainly don't want somebody, particularly if it's a 41% expansion in the permitted space. I would hate to see in the future somebody step forward and say, all right, this was approved for this applicant without a use permit, without stepping through the use permit process, without the normal review entailed in that, and I want my expansion. I just don't want us to go there. So once again, this is not any animus towards the project. It's a process question. And although I'm afraid process drives most people nuts, that government is based on process, and process is how the public knows that things are being done. So I would suggest we have to step through the process as it should be, rather than as we'd like to have it be.
That sounds right to me. That seems like that's our job. not to judge the, I mean, we do judge the projects, but most importantly to oversee the process.
I don't have any difficulty thinking of the pizza oven as appurtenant to the rest of that food preparation facility, but I do think John's right that this looks to me like an expansion, at least to some extent, of the operations of delicatessen, and that a modification of that use permit would be in order. I don't know that that's the only use to which the pizza oven would be put. This is located, and I should disclose, I met with the applicant's representative this afternoon so that I could see this area in its context. I've been out there to events of one sort or another some number of times over the years, but I wasn't sure that I could tell from the plans, which one of those memories was the correct one to orient. So that's an area which, in my experience, is used for a variety of functions that would be unrelated to the deli operations, in addition to whatever purpose it may serve in connection with the deli. That said, it does seem to me a use permit mod is appropriate. The other thing that struck me while I was out there, I think only one is going to be better.
I don't know if it's
I'd rather move mine further away.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I think we're fine. Thank you. Is a historic nature of the setting, and I'm pretty sure that the Krug structures, the historic structures, are on the city's inventory. I don't know to what extent we're looking at that context as historic. But after visiting the site this afternoon and looking at the staff report, it did seem to me that the absence of any discussion of whether or not this kind of addition in that space is consistent with the Department of Interior standards, which I believe in broad terms would require that this not look too much like the historic buildings. Just something in the staff report to indicate that the historic nature of the setting's been given some consideration would be appropriate.
I have an ancillary question that I'm very interested in sort of the way that this discussion is going, but the ancillary question is I don't understand the additional piece that we were just given because it doesn't seem to have any relationship to the site map as in our packet. Planner Heacock, can you help me understand this? Because this looks like it's in the middle of this open space, whereas this looks like it's not.
Yeah, this isn't a floor plan for the outdoor pavilion. I was out yesterday. I understood there were questions about the square footage of the deli and the commercial kitchen and whether or not they were one and the same. So I reached out to the applicant simply asking for clarification on where the deli space is in relationship to the commercial kitchen. So this is actually inside an existing, I believe, the Redwood building. Yep.
Oh, so this is the existing setup.
Yeah, that's the existing
Okay,
Redwood
right.
cellar. It's a
Okay.
very large
Great.
building.
And so currently this thing in the middle here, is that the current temporary pizza piece, or is it something else? No. Okay, that's nothing at all. Okay, great.
This is just the interior.
Okay, great. Okay. Thank you. Thanks. My question is answered.
Wine club.
Okay, good.
Is your mic on, Chair?
If they start squealing, I bet yell at you. I'm in agreement with both John and Lester. I really think that we need to go through the use permit process on this. So, I think we need more clarification on the historic building, and I really think that we need some information on that, at least in the staff report. I don't know if we really have to go for a historic. I don't know if it's been declared a historic building. I would think it has, but I don't know for sure. My guess would be that it is. So that's the way I feel about it. So, Bobby, do you have any more comments?
No, I'm not. I'm not in disagreement with anyone, for once.
Do I hear a motion? Do we just want to have them bring us back?
So it would be appropriate to, because the commission could either continue the item to allow the applicant to amend their package to include a use permit amendment. The commission could ask the applicant what they would like to see. They could request an up or down vote. You could request a continuance.
We also have not had public comment yet on this
That's
item.
correct. All right, we'll open public comment now. There's no public comment. Close public comment. Would the applicant like to tell us what he'd like to do?
Yeah, I need to go back to the client from the point of view of understanding the implication of this. I think our understanding was that it was a continuation of the use because it's a functional extension. So understanding what you've said, I'm not sure that it's economically viable to go to the extent for a 260 square foot building. I do want to just add to the historical component to this. There is notation on there that an existing stone building, which will be demolished, will be reused to add the historical significance to this. It's an inconsequential building, but I'm not sure that it is worth going through a use permit change to justify a 260 square foot gazebo.
Yeah, I would suggest we continue it to a date uncertain to allow Mr. Finnan to consult with his clients. Continue to a date uncertain. That would be my suggestion.
Is that agreeable to the commission? Would you like to make a motion?
I so move.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Pont,
Aye.
Commissioner Monette,
Yes.
Commissioner Knudsen,
Yes.
Vice Chair Hardy,
Yes.
Chair Kistner.
Yes. The next item on the agenda is public hearings, and the first 5.1 is a request by Tom Trainor on behalf of William and Lynda Tunney for adoption of a resolution approving a demolition permit, retroactive design review, and a variance in order to accommodate a partial demolition, reconstruction, and addition to the historic home located at 1508 Spring Street in a medium-density residential district. May I have a staff report, please?
Yes, thank you,
I'm going to
Chair.
recuse myself first. Thank you.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry, Lester. I forgot.
Thank you, Chair Kistner. I'll try and keep this as brief as possible due to the fact that it's a continuance and the weight of tonight's agenda. So as I just mentioned, this item has been continued from the September 5th, 2017 meeting of the Planning Commission in order for the applicant to submit a variance application and revise the front porch design in order to match what was previously approved, and the applicant has addressed these issues. The applicant has applied for a retroactive demolition permit to address unpermitted demolition, design review for the reconstruction of a home that was previously approved as a restoration, and a variance in order to waive required parking, covered parking. The current project would generally implement the previously approved design, except that a restoration of the historic elements is no longer possible due to the demolition of historic materials. As such, the applicant is now proposing to reconstruct, opposed to restore the historical elements of the previously existing home. This process will involve finding or procuring and matching materials and architectural features, and then reconstructing them, reconstructing the home in keeping with the previous design. The City of St. Helena relies on recognized architectural historians to provide the necessary information to support the determination that the project is or is not consistent with the Secretary of the Interior's standards, and whether proposed changes will have a significant impact on the historic integrity of the building. Pursuant to CEQA Section 15331, projects that follow the Secretary of the Interior's standards are generally not considered to have a significant effect on the environment and are therefore categorically exempt from the requirements of CEQA. Juliana Inman, an architect that meets the Secretary of the Interior's professional qualifications and standards in historic architecture, concludes that reconstruction of the home does meet the Secretary of the Interior's standards for the treatment of historic properties and as a reconstruction of a historic structure. While the previous approval can no longer be implemented due to the fact that the home was substantially demolished without the benefit of an issued building permit, thus rendering restoration impossible, the applicant is able to reconstruct the home in conformance with the Secretary of the Interior standards, which would maintain some elements of the historic integrity of design and the status as a contributing structure to the Adams Street Historic District. Furthermore, while not using materials original to the home, the reconstruction would be virtually identical to the previously approved restoration. Should the reconstruction not be approved, the home and property will remain in its current condition for an unknown period of time, leaving the current aesthetic for neighbors as well as motorists along Spring Street to view. Staff finds that the proposed configuration of the site, the overall design elements, and proposed materials and finishes are in character with the neighborhood and the community in general. Additionally, prior to demolition and earth-moving activities, the home and property was in a deteriorated condition and desperate need of repair. The proposed project will improve the visual appearance of the property, and for these reasons, staff recommends that the Planning Commission determine that it is exempt from the requirements of CEQA pursuant to Section 15303, and accept the required findings and approve a resolution granting a demolition permit, design review, and a variance approval for the proposed demolition and reconstruction of the residence located at 1508 Spring Street. I think those CEQA sections were wrong, but they are included in the staff report and in the accompanying resolution. We did receive 2 comment letters after the packet was issued. Those are on the dais and on the table in the back. One of those was from the original designers, I understand, giving their support for the project, and one was from Trainor Builders, kind of giving a history of some of the stuff that went along with that. So with that, I would be happy to try and answer any questions you may have. The applicant is here, as well as the builder.
Does anyone have any questions of staff?
I do have a question. Thank you, Planner Heacock. On page 104, I'm just wanting to confirm, because there's, sorry, I just see a little discrepancy, so I just wanted to confirm. Page 104 in our packet, is that what we're approving, or is this the prior piece? What's that?
I believe that's prior, but let me confirm. Oh, you know, that's an accompaniment. That appears to be something that was included with the water neutrality analysis, possibly.
Okay. So let me just tell you.
Yeah, that's what that is. When Applied Engineering did the water neutrality analysis, they included that plan set in the back for some reason.
Okay. So I hate to be a stickler about the historic structure aspects, but the slope on this porch is shown that it goes from the back of the porch forward. That's what it shows on page 104 of the front elevation, the right elevation. And the new plans, and it sort of shows it curving from the different. Now, at some point, this becomes a Sisyphean task. But I just know that historic building's a historic building, and what was it?
I believe the porch had been heavily modified, if I recall correctly, in the Julian Inman's report, and that I don't know that pitch would be a significant architectural deviation from what was originally approved.
The previous modification also.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it was much larger last time.
Well, they moved it back, but once again, the pitch is coming from the center out rather than from the inside the house out, which is different.
It's a little different.
What a stickler I am.
If you would, I've got a couple of things I'm concerned about as well, too, Madam Chair. May I?
Go ahead.
On the draft resolution, on page 64, item 15 reads, replacement of historic materials shall be done where the original material has been broken, weakened, lost, or weathered to an extent making repair infeasible. Replacement features shall match the old in design, color, texture, visual qualities, and material. Whereas point 11 on the same page says samples of the removed siding shall be used to reproduce the roadwood drop siding, photographs of the building from 7 July 2015 report, and other owner photographs shall be used to exactly reproduce the location and dimension of the siding and trim. It doesn't mention materials. I would prefer if that one clearly included the material has to be the same as well.
Noted. We can make that change.
Okay. Also, at the beginning of the resolution, where we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but everybody else goes whereas, I would prefer there be a whereas there that describes to some degree the incident of the destruction of the historic parts of the house. Otherwise, the items in resolution, same page starting with C, determined that is determined not to be significant architecturally or historically. That's because it was destroyed, right? So I think we need to make it clear in the resolution that C follows because the architecturally and historically important parts of the structure were destroyed, so that would be in the whereases under recitals, if you would please.
Yep, no problem.
And as a general statement, this has been a disaster, I think, for all of us. A very old structure was significantly diminished through no action or fault of the owner of that building, but nonetheless, the historically important part of the structure is toast. One could perceive it as that there's actually some sort of bonus for coming in and wrecking your historic building and then building what you want. Not that I perceive this way, nor do I think the owners did anything like that. But I would really hate to get it around that in St. Helena you can come and trash a historic building and then build something else. So not that we can act on this today, but I would like to see, this is another thing on your list, Noah, when we go through the zoning code, something that would keep this from happening again. Either building goes out and tags the building with a great big sign that says historic structure do not remove, or the builder is told in no uncertain terms, if you touch this thing, we're coming after you, or that there be some sort of significant penalty for having done so. I'd hate to see a link built pull up behind the back of the Goodman building and pull the top story down, and then say, oops. So we need to make sure in the future that this doesn't happen again. The only benefit to it happening now is both the owner and the builder are being as responsible as they can be, owning up to the error, saying they'll replace and repair and do the best they can to make the building look like it should have looked like before it got trashed. And that's all credit to you guys for doing that. But we've got to make sure it doesn't happen again, because there are a lot of historically important and beautiful buildings in town that we want to make absolutely dead sure that this kind of thing doesn't happen in the future.
I would like to speak in favor of the variance, since that's an important element of this approval. We feel that the facts are that the lot is an extremely narrow lot. It's only 35 feet wide. It shares a driveway with the property to the east of it, and therefore you can't put a covered parking space in the front of the property. The only place a covered parking space could be located would be in the rear of the property. To locate it in the rear of the property would pretty much take up the entire rear of the property if you put it in a turnaround area and things like that. So I think, from my understanding of what we've faced here, is that even if it was required to have a covered parking space in the back and one was actually built, it would never be used. It's just too difficult an area to get into, and it would just not be used. So I think that is a strong argument to grant the variance to forego with the covered parking space. I would also like to address what Commissioner John has said, is that I think I spelled out in my letter our understanding of how the siding got removed from the structure. And while in the last time I spoke, I accepted full responsibility for this, and I still do. But there were extenuating circumstances. The plans had gone through building, planning, everyone, and no one had picked up the fact that the plans actually showed the siding being removed. So I think that's something that if we're going to prevent something like this from happening in the future, that everyone needs to be on top of this. I think no one other than me in Trainor Builders really was aware that the siding was to be preserved, because there was no mention of it on the drawings. And one last thing, which I don't know how this will be received, but the resolution is asking that the building fees be doubled because of what's gone on here. I think the client has certainly suffered substantially by this delay, by the actual fees that have been paid to go through the whole process again and redesign. And I ask that you take that into consideration and perhaps forego the doubling of the building fees. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bill Tunney. I'm the applicant, and I think that we have done, and I appreciate Commissioner Pont saying, we have done everything that we can from day one to make this the correct project. The only time it got off keel was when one of the former commissioners wanted us to put a garage in the backyard, and we said that's not where we plan to live. That's a deal breaker, and so that the fact that the tree went down, that has nothing, very little to do, a little bit, but very little to do with not having the covered parking. I feel it's important to mention that because you couldn't have a project. It would kill the project. We took the council members out, and they all said, of course. So, in fact, Alan only voted no because he had to vote yes or no, and he wanted to support the planning commission. Having been on it himself, he thinks, why have a planning commission if you're not going to support it? And I could see that. I agree with that. Anyway, that is, I was asked by Noah to find out what was the history of the porch, and I didn't know, but I found out. I talked to the architect and my wife, and they were on the plans. The drawing was on the plans all the time, and we just assumed that was okay. And we assumed that Juliana thought they were okay also. She might have missed it. I don't know. Maybe staff missed it. Maybe should have been a question, but we were submitting so much stuff and going through such a process that back and forth with the architect. We got approved by the city council in April of last year, and as of March 10th, we had still not gotten a building permit. And I don't know what the delay was. We were desperately trying to get that house approved, and the architect, and back and forth. People we can't do anymore. We just really want to have our house back. And that's all I can say. Thank you.
Good evening. I apologize in advance for reading, but I forget things if I don't. My name is Patty Phelps. I own and live in my home at 1546 Oak Avenue, and have lived in St. Helena for 36 plus years. And I live and love my little cottage, which is one of those historical buildings. So I appreciate everything that's being said and considered. I'm here tonight to give voice to the issue of the Spring Street property owned by the Tunneys. I wrote a letter for your last meeting regarding what I knew of the particulars, mistakes made, responsibilities taken, penalties, etc., and encouraged in my letter that the voice of reason should prevail after all this time to allow the project to its completion. It was after I heard Trish Hanley's comments that I felt compelled to be here tonight. I can understand fully her fear for her property value, for her very future security, being located next to the decades derelict sad house and property at issue. I too am a single woman whose home is her most valuable asset. It would be just plain awful to feel the way Trish must now be feeling, and I echo her concerns. To conclude, I'd just like to talk about Mrs. Tunney a bit. I became acquainted with her 20 plus years ago through her shopping at my then shop, Murray & Gibbs on Adams Street. We cultivated a mutual respect through our love of rescue dogs, antiques, architecture, and making the old seem new again. I think with all sincerity that Mrs. Tunney and her husband saw something in the Spring Street property that needed saving and could allow her creative juices to flow. She possesses integrity, sensitivity, skill, and great style, and given your go-ahead with this project will make this property something that we as a community can and will be able to take pride in again. So I really ask you to allow this to go through. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Commissioners. Wayne Armstrong, 1339 Main Street. I don't want to repeat what's already been said, but I just want to add my voice of enthusiastic encouragement for this project and your approving it to finally let it go forward and get completed. Certainly, if it weren't for this very unfortunate mistake with the siding being removed from the house, it would have been well underway by now. I think, frankly, the historical status of the property notwithstanding, this property really was derelict and in serious need of repair for a period of many years. And so I think this is a good project. I think that the remedy before you in terms of approving the retroactive demolition permit and letting it go forward, certainly also approving the parking variance. Essentially, nothing has changed with the project except for this very, very serious mistake that was made. So the fact is that the lot, being 35 feet wide, is quite subpar in terms of width. Frankly, the shared driveway is extraordinarily narrow, and so the reasons for which the variance was approved are still absolutely in place. In fact, the mechanism of the variance exists, in my opinion, for exactly this kind of situation. So, frankly, I think highest and best use, certainly for the applicant, is for us to approve this and let it get completed. Certainly also for the property owners who are nearby, Trish most especially, who have really been adversely affected by this for several years. And frankly, I think for us as the broader community, I walk my dogs to work every day. I've been passing this falling down sort of looking structure for many years, and I think it'd be great to get it put back together into something that not only respects what will end up looking like the original structure, but also will enhance it and something that we can all be proud of. So again, just my enthusiastic voice of support for you to approve this and let it get done. Thank you so much.
Any further public comment?
Hi, Trish Hanley, the neighbor. I wasn't going to speak tonight because I pretty much said everything last week, but as far as the driveway variance, I actually wrote a letter, who knows when, months and months ago, asking to that they not be allowed to have the driveway in the back, because part of the reason I bought my property was this beautiful, deep backyard, which has backyards on the other sides. And I don't want a driveway, right next to my fence in the back where I have my peace and quiet away from Spring Street. And I guess I'm just going to repeat what I said 2 weeks ago. It's been 7 years. I'm turning 70. I don't want any more sevens in my life. Just let's move on. And thank you very much for all your time and comments.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Public comment is closed. Bobby, would you like to start, please?
I have just a question about Mr. Trainor's bringing up of the fees. Director Hausch, could you talk to that a little bit?
Last year, the City Council approved a staff recommendation in response to our existing code enforcement policies and procedures, which from my perspective are somewhat lacking in our enforcement abilities. So staff recommended that any building permit that is issued as a result of unpermitted construction be required to pay double fees. That is a city council approved action, and that is what's required for any building permit that's issued as a result of unpermitted construction.
So I'll just start with a comment. I'm supportive of the fee structure as directed by council, and I'm supportive of the project. With the variance, including the variance.
You have no comments? Bobby?
Well, the variance was not approved by the Planning Commission last year. It was the appeal was upheld, but I still, I would wonder if there was some other way to get permission to not have to have a covered parking place, because by the definition of the variance, to me, it just does not make sense. The variance, in order to be a variance, the hardship has to be peculiar to the property and not created by an act of the owner. To my mind, if you have a small lot, you design small. And you don't try, if you put too much in it, you won't be able to do the things you're supposed to do to meet all the requirements. So my sense is that I can't approve the variance. I don't mind there not being an uncovered, there not being a covered parking place. But that just doesn't make sense to me, that the concept and the language of what a variance is does not fit this situation as far as I'm concerned. I think it's too much stuff on that tiny little lot. I still think that. I thought that a year ago. I still do. As far as the fees thing is concerned, since there were extenuating circumstances, I'm wondering if that can be appealed, if just that piece can be appealed to the City Council. I'm not sure what the protocol is on that. But, if it were a deliberate effort to deceive and to break the rules, I can see the doubling, but since there were other circumstances here, it seems to me like that the applicant should at least have a chance to appeal in front of the City Council, who's in charge of this this directive. And I'm not sure, is that possible to do that? Do you know, or?
The City Council is the only body that would have the authority to waive the required double permit fee.
So it would be possible for the applicant to go before them, perhaps? Okay, so they could go before them.
They have to pay the fees, though, to go before the council.
That's true, but, well, yeah. But I am very sympathetic to that, since it wasn't deliberate and there were other things involved that are extenuating circumstances. So I guess I like the idea of the house and a garage in the back, but the pool and the rental, I think it's too much for that piece of property, and I still feel that way. I felt that way a year ago, and I still feel that way.
Oh, Bobby, number one, the ADU is now required. We're required to approve them by new state law.
I understand. Then something else has to be made smaller. It's just not room on there for everything, so, to my mind.
I'm going to also say that I happen to be on the commission that disapproved this. I also still think that the house is too big. However, I will vote to approve this project because I think enough is enough, and I think that right now the condition of the lot is a health hazard, and I think it's certainly affecting the ladies' property values, and I think it's time that we get through this and go on with it. I do think that they should pay the fees, being that they're required to pay them. I'm sorry for all the mix-up. I don't know who caused all of it, and I voted against it the first time. We'll be happy to vote for it this time. Do I have a motion?
Move the staff recommendation.
As modified in the resolution.
Correct. Yes.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Pont?
Yes.
Commissioner Knudsen?
Yes.
Commissioner Monette?
No.
Chair Kistner?
Yes. I would, however, like to say, Noah, that this is one of the things that I think we're going to get to is the size of some of these buildings being put on some of these lots. Because without the exemption there, they would be over far again. So. I just want to make that point, that this is a very big building on a very small piece of property. Okay, so thank you very much. Would you all like to leave, or do you want to join us for the rest of the evening?
I would just like to thank the Commission for approving this project, and we will do our utmost to make certain that it's a project everyone in town will be proud of and happy to.
And I tell you, we'll check on you, so that's okay.
Thank you.
Have a nice evening now. Did he go home? We need Lester.
And I need to recuse.
Oh.
I need to recuse myself.
I can't hear you.
I need to recuse myself from the next.
Okay, you're going to recuse yourself. Okay.
I live next door. I live next door.
You live next door. I'm not going to ask you what you want us to do then.
Smart.
Okay.
Come and get me.
All right. We'll put you on a string. All right. Next item is 5.2. It's a request by Carl Denny. Is that correct? For demolition permit and design review approval to demolish an existing single-family resident and detached garage constructed in 1954 and construct a new one-story single-family residence with a attached garage at 1711 Pine Street in the medium-density residential zoning district. May I have a staff report, please?
Thank you, Chair Kistner. Good evening, Planning Commissioners.
Hello, Lily.
Hi. So the project before you is the Dean Residence Demolition and Design Review. The applicant is requesting to demolish an existing 760 square foot single-story residence and 274 square foot detached garage that was constructed around 1954 and construct a new two-story 2,400 square foot single-family residence with a detached 200 square foot garage located in the medium-density residential zoning district. I will note that the new residence was erroneously referred to as a one-story residence in the staff report and notice, unfortunately. But the 24-foot 8 inches height that was referenced is correct, and obviously on the plans it does show the two-story residence. So I apologize for that confusion. The proposed project is located in a cul-de-sac that is defined by kind of a mixture of residential styles, some of which are more of more recent construction, and then some seem to be more early 20th century. The proposed design is a simple modern design with references to traditional farmhouse and ranch architecture. The proposed materials would consist of vertical tongue and groove siding with charcoal gray stain, steel window frames, and asphalt shingle roof. The garage door would be glass panels with a steel frame. To ease the transition between adjacent homes, the proposed project is bordered on one side by a one-story house and the other side by a two-story house. The project would concentrate larger masses towards the adjacent two-story house and limit the height and massing on the portion closest to the one-story residence to the west of the proposed project. This is kind of to help ease the visual transition. Also, in an effort to minimize the appearance of the single-car garage, which is located more at the front of the property, and soften the overall appearance of the residence, the applicant has included a full-view glass garage door, which ties it in with the rest of the fenestration on the house, and also increased the amount of landscaping proposed, introduced a vegetative trellis, and revised the driveway to feature porous grass pavers with concrete strips as opposed to just a large paved area. The proposed residence meets all development standards prescribed for the medium-density residential zoning district, including the floor area ratio and applicable general plan policies and goals as detailed in the staff report. In regards to the demolition, the demo of the existing house and detached garage would not affect a historic resource or necessarily eliminate an essential component of the neighborhood, given that the existing residence is not particularly unified with the larger streetscape. And then the demolition is contingent on approval of the replacement structure. Last, because the residence exhibits a logical relationship to the site, complies with prescribed development standards, and features a design form and massing that is responsive to the surrounding context, it's determined that it meets all design review findings. Staff did receive one comment on the project during the project review period, which was responded to in the staff report. Staff was subsequently made aware that there was some concern about the potential for a future accessory dwelling unit to be added on the property. While this is not part of the project and not before the Commission this evening, I will just say that any future accessory dwelling unit would be subject to development standards prescribed by the code that include setbacks, height, as well as maximum floor area ratio that would likely limit any development potential for an ADU to about 400 or 500 square feet. And while review of ADUs is ministerial, there are obviously standards in place to ensure the scale, siting, and location is appropriate. Subsequent to that, we did receive 3 additional comments that were submitted at this evening's hearing, and they have been provided to you at the dais. One of which noted the erroneous reference to the 1-story versus 2-story, which I apologize for, and I hope that didn't cause too much confusion. In regards to the project before the Commission this evening, because the proposed demo and new construction was found to meet all applicable regulations and complies with the demolition and design review criteria, staff recommends that the Planning Commission find the project exempt from CEQA pursuant to Section 15303 and accept the required findings to approve the requested demolition permit and design review for the Dean residence. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Did you say the existing is a 1-story or 2-story, Lily?
The existing is a 1-story.
Thank you.
The proposed is a 2-story.
I missed part of that, and I want to be sure that's what you said.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And could you tell me what the side setbacks are?
The side setbacks are 10 feet. There is, at least on one side, there's a bay window, which would project, I believe, 2 feet into the side setback. Which as a architecture, or maybe that's on 2 sides, as an architectural feature that is allowable. But
what about the garage? It doesn't look...
The garage, yeah, the garage is a detached accessory structure, and that, I believe, has, let me see.
Is it really?
I want to say 3...
Yeah, it's 3 feet is the only
3 feet.
I found, yeah.
I believe.
I don't think...
Give me 1 second. Yeah, the minimum is 3 feet required. I believe that's
for an accessory structure, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions, Steph?
Yes, I have some questions. I'm looking at the sheet A 2.0 and struggling to understand how the setback, what the setback relationship is to the property line here. Do we have both a street setback and a front setback? Or is this just a setback from the property line?
That depends on what.
These plans are really difficult.
It might be just face a curb.
I'm not sure. I know that from the curb, I want to say that it's like a 40-foot setback, but I know from the property line, I want to say that it is closer to 20.
Well, what does the development standard?
Development standards are 20 feet from back of sidewalk.
From back of sidewalk.
Not face of curb, back of sidewalk.
Is that by the street?
The property line side of the sidewalk. So there's curb, sidewalk, back of sidewalk, and then the property line typically starts.
So we're more than 20 feet from there.
But
we're more than 20 feet. So the house is proposed to be more setback than the 20 feet. There are sections of our code which measure from face of curb. That is not the case for front yard setbacks in the medium density district. It's just another
Because
place.
mine's from face of curb, so.
And
okay.
so if there were no sidewalk, we'd be measuring from the property line, but where there is a sidewalk, we assume the back of the sidewalk is the property line?
Back of sidewalk where there is one, or edge of pavement or property line are the other mechanisms when there is no sidewalk.
Not necessarily. I mean, mine's narrower because they own the first few feet of my frontage is actually owned in fee simple by the city. So my setback's measured from face of curb, which is actually inside city property. So I think it depends where you are and how it works.
And when the property was developed.
Right.
My property goes to the middle of the street, my property line.
So the garage actually sits back how
So
far
I should be
from,
confused.
from the face of the curb?
Okay.
Lily, do you know? Because how wide's the
Lines
sidewalk?
are confusing enough.
From face of curb, I'm not sure. The applicant may be able to speak more
Okay.
specifically to that distance.
Let me say this, Lily. When it comes to these questions of 2 stories where there are 1-story houses around it, particularly where you've spoken with the applicant and got them to change their structure to help guard against sightline problems, I would find it in the future helpful to see a sketch of where the 1s are, where the 2s are, and how they're sited on the nearby properties. So I get some kind of idea what's going on. Is by what's presented here, I can't tell, who's looking at whom, or what's going on. So I do have a question. The windows on the second story of the proposed structure are asymmetrical side to side. So the side that has the actual viewable windows from the second story, is that on the side that has the 2-story house adjacent, or the side that has the 1-story house adjacent?
I don't think it's 2-story.
I believe that there is a window on the second story that faces the 1-story house, and then the other elevation has what look like kind of windows that are a bit raised.
Because on one side it looks like we have 3 flat, rather small, high-up windows.
Mm-hmm.
That's the side that faces the 2-story house? And the side with the larger viewing windows faces the 1-story house? That would strike me as sort of backwards.
I think that is... What's the south elevation?
We could let the applicant answer that question.
Yeah.
Let's ask that after.
I will say that this did get flipped in the through the planning process, and that could have been something that, we flipped the house, but then that didn't get caught. But the applicant can speak more to that.
Would the applicant like to speak?
Hello. I could speak to some of the questions that are being asked. From the curb, the garage starts at 33 feet.
Okay.
And actually goes to 34 feet because the lot is slanted.
Yeah.
From the outside of the curb?
From the outside of the curb.
Okay.
But from the actual lot line, it's at 22 feet. So it's actually set back further than the required setback.
So the city owns the first 10 feet in fee simple?
Yeah, I think it's 10 feet. And the current proposed house is actually going to be 40 and a half feet from the curb currently. So the house actually sits back and aligns with the house next door. In fact, it sits behind the actual house next door because the house next door protrudes a little bit forward with a front porch. So we did take...
The 2-story side or the 2-story?
The 2-story side. The 2-story side. Because the lot is diagonal, each house is set back a little bit further. So the house that's set back next to me is where the garage is sitting right now. And there is some concern there that we could talk about because they would like to see me change the 8-foot required distance between the house and the garage to go to 5 feet. to give them 3 feet of more viewable area. The second story actually aligns with the second story house next door, and we propose to do it that way so it doesn't shade their backyard and their sun. So if anything were to change or to move, it would affect their yard, pretty greatly. The one-story house next door, we have a corner window in a den area that overlooks their kind of garage area and back, and that's the window that you're talking about. But there's no bedrooms or no other access. It's a den that looks over.
So the two windows would be, so the north side would be the side that faces the one-story house?
The one with all the little windows faces the two-story house.
Okay.
So that corner window that you're talking about that would look over their kind of garage area is the den.
Okay, but you've got on that side. So we're looking at the south elevation. You've got 3 small windows high up on the second story.
Yes.
So they're not
looking into the other neighbor's window.
Okay.
That's what we were very sensitive to all of that.
Good.
And we actually set the house back that 40 feet so that it did feel proper on the street, and we didn't raise the second story until we were almost 60 feet back.
Okay.
So you don't feel that second story on the street and next to that one-story house because the second story is 60 foot back, but still in the midpoint of the second-story house next door so that it doesn't shade their backyard.
Let me ask a question about fencing. Are you requesting an 8-foot fence by any slight chance?
No.
Okay. You're going to go 6 with lattice?
I'm going to go with whatever the neighbors want to do together.
Okay.
I'm not doing anything on my own. If the neighbors want to do fences together, we'll do fences together.
Good fences make good neighbors.
Yeah. So we've throughout this process, we started this process actually even before we closed on the property last year, and we were with staff since December of last year, talking about the proposal, looked at a bunch of different options of how we could maximize the lot and build something that would be a 3-bedroom home on the lot. And after almost a year or 10 months or whatever we are now, this was the plan. We flipped the house because of where neighbors would like to see things, and we've done a lot to. And I've also met with all the neighbors. I met with them all again today, addressed all their concerns, and it sounds like the one big concern that everybody would like to see is if there's a possibility to go to 5 feet between the garage and which I'm fine with.
And a quick review of the code, it seems to identify that would be a possibility because the garage is not located within a required setback. Front setback now. No, because it's the side.
The side.
I'm sorry, yeah.
That's what the way our
So the code reads, minimum separation shall be 8 feet. This is for accessory structures. Shall be 8 feet if any portion of an accessory building or structure is located within a required yard. That's interpreted to mean setback. Staff was thinking the front setback because the garage is set back further than the front, but it is within the required side yard for the house. So that 8 feet between the building and the home and the accessory structure is required when the garage is located within a required setback.
Was that done for fire standards?
It is not a building code requirement.
Okay.
So staff cannot speak to the motivation.
It's literally just a zoning code requirement. There's no other. Okay.
That's correct.
That means you can't change it from 3 to 5 because you've been moving it up. I thought it was the side.
They'd have to ask for a variance to move it closer to give you the 5 feet, though.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
I could point to it on the picture if anybody wants.
Yeah, either one is going to, I'd rather ask for the variance than a plan development overlay. Okay.
And the reason why the neighbors are looking for that is that the garage right now as it sits would sit proud of their house because, again, the street's angled, the lots are angled, and they go like this, so each house sets back a little bit further, and they don't want to feel the garage. Even though I'm 2 feet from the allowable setback, they would like to see it at 5 foot from the allowable setback. If that can go to 5 feet, I'm okay with it. It doesn't architecturally impede anything. But if there's not really an approach to do it, I don't know what to. So the front of the house. So this is another thing to note. Front of the house to the curb is almost 41 feet. It's 40 and a half feet. From the back of the house to the back of the lot line is 47 feet. So it's kind of in the midpoint of the property. I've got 2,900 square feet in the back and I've got 2,000 square feet of land in the front. So if anything was to happen to that house, if it starts moving to the back, I keep losing square footage in the back. When I flipped it, because of the angle of the lot, I already lost 350 square feet of backyard, and I'd rather not lose any more backyard, especially because I put the house 40 feet back from the curb.
Angle the house.
Angle.
Ultra modern.
Well, the only good thing about the size of the house, I will say, because the neighbor's biggest concern is not really what I'm going to do, but what somebody might do in the future by building a guest house. By maximizing the FAR on the property actually limits the amount of what could be done in the back, and I think that seemed to make people a lot happier.
I think so. We've got an exemption for ADUs, right?
400 square feet.
That's why you can put in a 400 square foot place.
Right. Which that seemed to make a lot of people happy today when I talked to them, because they were thinking I can go to 1,200 square foot and put 2 stories in the back and all sorts of...
No, but you could put it on top of the garage.
Yeah.
We couldn't say anything about it.
Right.
Oh, and that's a 3
He's
foot.
only got a 3. So if you give him the 5-foot setback, he puts the ADU on top of the garage. You stick with 3 feet, you can't put the ADU on top of the garage. Does that make sense, everybody? Okay. The setback on the garage is now 3 feet. Okay? And he can't put an accessory dwelling unit on top of the garage because the standard setback for an accessory dwelling unit is 5 feet. So he can't stick it on top of the garage. If he moves it over so his side setback is 5 feet, then he can put an accessory dwelling unit on top of the garage.
You're asking to scoot it back, not sideways.
Not sideways, just back. Just back
It's,
towards the main.
it's not, we don't talk back
Yeah.
and forth today. Are you through?
If there's any more questions.
Any more questions?
I have a question of staff, another question for staff, but yeah, not for you.
Okay.
I'd like to open public comment. Is there some public comment on this?
I am Lisa Cakebread. I'm in the 2-story house to the north of the property. So the question that we had was we were hoping that the garage could go back toward the back lot, not sideways toward the remainder of the building. Would they be able to do that if they're still staying within the 3-foot setback?
But then he's got the 8.
It's required to be separated from the main house by 8 feet, and I was looking at it. It appears that both kind of north to south and east to west, it's proposing an 8-foot separation.
And that's not, you can't, it's not negotiable that you can change that?
That's correct.
Okay. So that was one of the things that we were very concerned about, is that he could add an additional building in the back we met with him at one point, and that was one of the things that he had told us that he was considering, was putting in an additional building in the back. Right now, he's adding quite a bit of square footage. I'm not sure exactly what the square footage of the building is. Is it 2,600? 24?
2481, I believe. Or 2381.
So the current building is around 700 square feet, so he's adding a lot of square footage. It's pardon?
It's about 3 times as much.
So it's a small cul-de-sac. There's not a lot of parking in the cul-de-sac. When you come to the end of the cul-de-sac, it's all red, so there's no parking at the end of the cul-de-sac. So adding that much square footage is a concern for additional parking requirements. And he's taking away one of the parking spaces in front of his house because he's now going to have 2 parking spaces in front of the garage. So then if you were to already adding so much square footage, then you're going to impact the parking on the street. And so we're concerned, we can't really do anything about the size because it's permitted. But if you're adding another additional building that you potentially would rent out to a third party, then you're going to have even more pressure on our parking. And right now, there's a lot of pressure on our parking. And so that's a big concern for us, and we don't want that to be a problem. And then the other question we have is the cypress tree. We've talked to Carl, and he's agreed to leave the cypress tree, but wanted to bring that up. It's a 75-year-old tree. It's been there a long time. It's a beautiful tree offering a lot of shade and privacy for many of the neighbors. And then just the setback for, again, vis-a-vis the 1-story building. that is to the south, that it does sit quite a bit out ahead of that property. And we'd asked that if potentially he could just move the entire, both structures further away from the street, and then that would resolve that issue. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Sarah Lonsdale in the one-story house on the other side. And we're the people who are impacted most with the garage. I have to say that flipping the house was actually a really good idea because of the two-story with the two-story house. And so that feels much more in balance. And even though there is that window, I think it just feels like a better layout. So the only real problem is the garage. Because we are on the three houses, are on the lot lines at an angle, all of a sudden our view is taken away and blocked, and it's sort of closing in. It's like having this big wall down the front of your driveway all of a sudden. And up until now, it's been open. Like I can see, when I go outside my front door, I can see Lisa's house to the right. But if a garage goes in, I've got sort of all that is blocked off. So speaking with Carl, we talked about keeping the 3 foot at the side, but moving it backwards. So maybe, I don't know if that's a variance or you move the whole thing back, but I think the house has been placed, the main house is placed in a way that actually kind of works for everything. Once it starts going back, then that overlooks us all in the back. So the main house is actually in a good place, I feel. It's just the garage is really a little bit too far forward, and that 8 feet, if there's some way that can be changed so the house comes back, at least 3 feet, I feel that would be a much better design. All in all, I really like the design, but I think that's just kind of a sticking point that really doesn't feel in keeping with the neighborhood. And we're not asking for the garage to be put at the back, which is, we have our garage in the back, other people have their garages further back. But I think if we could narrow that space, that would really resolve the issue and be more in keeping with the neighborhood as well. The other thing is the cypress, the tree in the back. It provides a lot of shading and screening. There's another two-story house at the back that if you took that down, it's a really big concrete house. It would just completely sort of ruin everyone. All of a sudden, that house would become very visible, and it's a lot of concrete that I don't think anybody really wants to see. So I think if we can have some sort of agreement to make that a heritage tree or something that stays, that would be great. The rest of the landscape, that can go. I mean, I think the landscape proposal is pretty good. And then I think finally is a concern about another unit being built in the back. So I know, Lily, you used the word likely that it would be 400 square feet. I think it would be nice to know that it can only be 400 square feet. I noticed the likely.
Well, I think that was just an estimate, but I think given where he's at with the floor area ratio, it would be 400 to 500 square feet. He has like a little bit left over, and then there's a 400-foot exemption.
Right, okay.
So that was just estimated.
Okay, I just wanted to know what that really meant. So, okay.
You can look at it.
Gotcha.
Any more public comment?
Can you look at anything over 100 feet for the accessory dwelling?
Hi, my name is Connie Thornburg, and I'm a neighbor, and I have a sweet little farmhouse that's a one-story that I love, and I welcome the new development. I think this design is actually really beautiful, but I second what Sarah and Lisa are saying about the tree. Certainly, we live in a tree-lined community, and it's part of the charm of St. Helena, and we all are looking at bigger houses. I live on Allen Street, so I'm looking at a lot of bigger houses, but it's great to see the trees that are still entwined in the new development. Also, I think the garage, when you feel pinned in like that, it does change your living experience in a community when you're walking down the street and seeing your neighbors. And I think as a neighborhood that we live in, we need to be mindful of pinning in the smaller homes. Thank you.
Any more public comment?
I did just want to address the concern about the parking. So the required parking for a house this size is 2 parking spaces, and it will have 3 off-site parking spaces. So we're actually including an extra parking space on the property to allow for the 3-bedroom house, even though what's required is only a 2-car parking for the house. And then the last thing is just, like I said, I'm okay with it going to 5 feet if there's a way to make that happen, but if not, I really don't want to move the house back any further because my front yard and my backyard are 1,000 square feet apart. So I don't really have much room in the back anymore if I keep pulling it back any further. And the garage being set back 33 feet from the curb is pretty far back from the curb at this point compared to some of the other homes in the neighborhood. I know that house is there, and I know it's on a diagonal, and I'm sorry about that, but I don't know how else to solve that at this point.
So staff has reviewed the code briefly. We do feel that you would have the authority to require the tree to be preserved as a condition of approval, given that there are findings that the whether natural features are appropriately preserved and integrated with the project is one of the findings that's required to be made with design review, so that could be a condition. There does not appear to be any flexibility in the separation between the accessory structure and the primary structure. 1 covered parking space is required for the project, so they are required to provide covered parking. One option may be to direct the applicant to construct the parking to the smallest dimensions possible. Staff is not aware if the current design is a little bit larger than what would be minimally required. I don't have a scale, so I can't tell. But
I need to ask this then, Noah. What's the definition in the current code for attached? If all we have to do is sling some 2x8s across,
you're not supposed to design it.
Make a trellis, voila. I don't know what the definition for attached is.
It's currently connected to the building with a trellis. Staff did not find that to be attached, so therefore it could take advantage of the reduced setback. If it was attached, it would have to meet the side setback for the main dwelling, which is 10 feet.
10 feet, so there's no way we can get fun. Okay.
Well, don't redesign it. My question to staff was that actually number 12, whether natural features are appropriately preserved and integrated, because it said this site doesn't feature any significant natural features. And I was wondering what you meant by that, because I was thinking of the tree, but it's already been brought up. So, but what does the staff feel is a natural feature?
I mean, it could be trees, topographical features, that kind of thing, but that was coming from a place of the fact that the city doesn't have, we don't typically regulate tree removal on private property, so saving for that, when I was running through those, I didn't identify any.
So a creek would be a natural feature or a view?
Yeah, creek, view, topographical feature, yeah.
Probably not a view, because the city has no view shed protection criteria, but natural features definitely rock outcroppings, creeks, trees, those types of things.
There seems to be quite a bit of concern about a possible accessory dwelling unit on the property. I don't want to lecture anybody about what's allowed under current state law, but I might suggest that you could give us and the rest of the crowd a couple minutes on ADUs and existing state law.
Sure. So as many of you are probably aware, January 1st, new allowances for accessory dwelling units, granny units, or second units were went into the law by the state. Essentially, so any of you have the right to construct a second dwelling unit on your property, subject to certain criteria, as do any of your neighbors, and staff has no ability to say no to that. This is a response to the lack of housing for the state. In general, the legislature is essentially chipping away at the local jurisdiction's ability to regulate housing because of the housing crisis that's been identified by the state. And it's worth noting that the legislature just passed a number of additional housing bills which will make it easier for housing to be built in communities throughout California. Whether the governor chooses to sign all or any of those, we'll have to see in the next month, but changes are coming to housing law which generally is going in the direction of taking less and less discretion away from local jurisdictions with the goal of making it easier to construct residential units in communities in the state.
Well, it seems to me the fundamental conundrum presented by the project in light of the neighbor comments and concerns is the lack of any authority for the commission to vary development standards in order to reconcile a project with the design review standards. And I'm thinking in particular here of the compatibility of design with the immediate environment of the site. And I think that's probably the finding that most clearly includes a response or relationship of the design to the neighborhood is really what we're talking about here. And we don't have that authority. The code provisions that have most frequently been used by property owners who wanted some relief from particular development standards has been the plan development overlay. I don't see any other way to do it. I'm not at all sure what additional burden that would place on an applicant at this state, although I suspect it would be significant. Haven't looked at that or thought about that. I'm inclined to think, since we've had some extensive recent discussion of land use policy priorities and future work of the Commission with review and updates to certain parts of the zoning ordinance being on the list, that we may want to look at this particular problem. And I don't mean this particular site, but just looking at the code to see if there's some place where an amendment to the code would give the Commission the ability to reconcile design-related criteria in the context of design review approval with the basic development standards by making an exception, or however that would be worded in the code, to enable the Commission to approve a project that has, as an example, 5 feet of separation from between a detached garage and a primary dwelling unit versus 8, when the result is to better harmonize the project design with the neighborhood. But as it is, I don't want it to require the applicant to come back with a whole new package, including a plan development overlay. I think a condition of approval requiring retention of the tree for so long as it's structurally sound is appropriate. And with that change, I would be prepared to approve the design review.
I'd be prepared to approve it also. The only thing I have to say is with the garage, I believe there's someplace in the general plan that indicates the garages should be in the back of the house. However, if you go down Pine Street, you find that most of the garages are in the same place this one is, and therefore I don't think that we can use that against the applicant in order to deny the claim. But there is that in the general plan indicating that it prefers to have the garages in the rear of the property. So, but I don't think we can just use that on this particular case because of the fact that they're all that way over there. So.
Right, I agree with both your points, but I think that the main problem here, and once again we're getting back to the zoning code, is the allowed FAR ratios and the exemptions therein.
Absolutely.
We've got a lot of house on a fairly small lot. In fact, we're getting close. Isn't our buildable lot like 7,000 square feet? This one's
7,500, I think.
This lot is slightly bigger, but that is the standard lot size.
Yeah, so we're right close to the lower edge of our limit here.
And when you start adding then you add the garage and the other things that you get for nothing.
We're putting
it's
almost 2,500 square feet of house on the lot, plus they're putting a 200 square foot of garage, plus they have a right for an accessory dwelling unit under our current code. I don't think it'd be 500 square feet because you only got 0.09 left on the ratio. I think it'd be 410, 415, something like that, and they'd be maxed out. So we've got the ability to put a lot, if you will, on this lot, and that just means our floor area ratios need adjustment. Maybe it's by zone, but it looks like to me that's one of the things on our list to review. And back to Lester's point, we can't change it on the fly. We've got what we've got at this point and have to move forward.
Correct.
I would tend to endorse this with the changes discussed by the rest of the commission.
Well, I would first like to really thank the applicant for contacting the neighbors and being open to change and all of that stuff. I also agree with Lester about the number 6, compatibility with future construction often on the site, but also number 1, consistency and compatibility with the general plan. And the part that I'm thinking of is 4.3.25, avoid, let's see, where did I write it down? Avoid putting the, I really want to read it the way it's supposed to be read. Limit allowable building envelope by parcel size to avoid overbuilt conditions. And I've sort of been up here as feeling like somewhat of a lone voice with all of these big houses on small lots. And this lot is really deep, which means it's pretty narrow. So the full number of square feet can be deceptive because it's very narrow. So my sense is that it should be 1 story. It should go back further. So why do you have to have a big yard if you need more square feet? It should be smaller because it's a narrow lot and it's got smaller houses around. It's got some bigger houses around it too, I have to admit. But just to be consistent with myself, I just wish that a lot that is really narrow and there are side setback concerns be 1 story and not 2 stories. I know you flipped and did all kinds of good things, and it looks like this has the approval of the commission. So I can stick by my my philosophy here without hurting anyone, I suppose. But also I wanted to say the trees, there's a redwood at the back of the property. That's what's in the staff. Now, I'm assuming that's the cypress. Is that correct? Yeah, okay. All right. So anyway, I think it's too much building on that lot, and I would like to see it 1 story. And if you needed more square feet, go into the back, and you wouldn't have space for a second unit, but then you wouldn't have space for a second unit. So, and you could, okay. So anyway, that's where I am.
Do I have a motion, please?
Sure. I'll move that we approve the project as proposed with 1 additional condition, which will require retention of the cypress tree for so long as it's structurally sound.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Vice Chair Hardy,
Yes.
Commissioner Pont,
Yes.
Commissioner Monette,
No.
Chair Kistner.
Yes. Thank you very much. Did you feel my string?
Yeah.
I was reeling. All right, the next item is 5.3. It's a request by Suzanne Tate for a use permit to establish a wine business office and tasting salon at 1309 Main Street in the Central District, Zoning District. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Chair Kistner. As Chair Kistner said, the Tate Business Office and Tasting Salon proposal includes a request for a use permit to establish an office and attached small tasting room at a vacant space located at 1309 Main Street in the Central Business District. The use would operate as winery offices for a small production winery that produces approximately 1,000 cases per year, which is produced from 100% Napa Valley grapes, 30% of which come from the Santa Helena AVA. In addition to this, the applicant would like to establish a small tasting room to offer appointment-only seated tastings for up to 8 guests at a given time. There would be a condition of approval that would limit this to a maximum 4 tasting appointments per day. The proposed use would be expected to operate 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. 7 days per week and would be run by 2 full-time employees, which are expected to be Suzanne and her husband, David Tate, and then potentially 1 part-time seasonal employee as needed. All employees would be responsible beverage certified by a program put forth by the Napa Valley Vintners. There are 2 designated parking spaces at the rear of the building that would provide parking for the space. As both a tourist and a local serving use that aligns with the community image of St. Helena, the proposed wine tasting room and office appears to meet the intent of the general plan policies and goals. In regards to zoning, the office and attached tasting room are subject to a conditional use permit and would be required to produce wines from a minimum 75% Napa Valley grapes. As I said, they're currently produced from 100% Napa Valley grapes and therefore meet this requirement. As the tenant space is within the parking impact overlay district, it's required to have at least 1 designated space, and it has 2 spaces and complies with the parking requirements. Finally, as a proposed office space and small tasting room, there is no expectation that the project would generate noise, traffic, fumes, odors, or anything else that would be injurious to surrounding commercial land uses. The proposed use would be both locally and tourist serving use that would occupy what has been a long vacant space and that would perpetuate an economically viable economy. The use would be compatible with surrounding land uses, which include restaurants, retail, and artisanal food shops and wine tasting rooms, as well as some professional offices. There's no aspect of the project that would inhibit or otherwise conflict with a component of the general plan. We did receive several letters in support of the project, which came in after the publication of the staff report, but I believe they've been provided to you. Given that the project was found to be consistent with the general plan and zoning code, as well as the use permit findings, staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution finding that the project is categorically exempt under CEQA Section 15301 and approve a use permit for the Tate office and winery tasting room. And that's all I have.
Any questions of staff?
I wanted to know, it shows on this page, I'm not sure what page it is, well, it's this hand thing. It shows that there is, or no, it's not, that was the first one. It shows that there is a sink, a dishwasher and a counter with cabinets and a dishwasher and a small refrigerator. on, I guess it's the second story. Is that already there, or is that proposed, or what?
I believe that is there.
It's there. Okay.
It's actually not a second level, it's a drop level.
Oh, it's a drop level. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I couldn't tell from here. All right, thanks.
Any other questions?
Yeah, a couple. Excuse me for being dense, but exactly where is this located? Is this located next to the alley or next to the walkway?
It's in the alley.
I guess you would consider it an alley, but it's not on the street frontage. So if you walk back where it says hotel, walk back into the little enclave.
There's literally an alley.
Not that one, no. By the hotel.
It's on the walkway.
It's on the walkway, so it's not on the alley. No. I'm reading alley, and alley's got a definite, meaning in state law. So please don't put alley down when you don't mean the alley.
Oh yeah, that's the walkway.
I was trying to place this thing, and I just couldn't do it.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah.
Second thing, and this is really minor. Somehow the resolution format got changed. If you look at the resolution, this one says whereas. When did we change to the whereas format?
This could be a vestige from a previous resolution. We have been actually working on our resolution template. So if the commission would like to request specific direction after this item, we're happy to take that with regards to how we're making the resolution findings and the recitals.
Okay, so this is a cut and paste error.
Likely.
Okay.
Along the same lines, I really do like the democratic aspect of this, where all things are equal. But on page 168 and 169, the findings, they're all number one. So I just don't know if that's just in a bad template or something.
No, the agenda management software forces us to write everything into a template that's not Word, and we have challenges occasionally with translating that into the packet that gets printed. Please forgive those types of issues. They are not staff related, and we occasionally don't catch them when the final packet is being produced.
Okay, well, luckily I can count to 12, so there was no problem.
Well, you can't say we'll play favorites. They're all number one.
Right. No ranking.
David, any questions?
There are just a couple of things that caught my attention in findings that I wanted to draw to staff's attention. In the last finding regarding capacity of surrounding streets, the project is described as a small-scale winery. This is an office and tasting room. I find that a confusing description there, or reference, maybe is a better way to put it. It's associated with the winery, but the winery is not there at the St. Helena Hotel.
Yeah, that was...
And the other is at the bottom of page 168. I guess that's the sixth finding. I'm very leery of attaching significance to ownership in fact-finding or in this setting. I mean, it may be a locally owned business, but I don't see that the ownership is relevant to the finding. It's a local business, and I think that is relevant to the finding because we're talking about the economic interaction between this business and other businesses, but I don't think the ownership is relevant. So I would personally be pleased if that just said as a local business rather than locally owned.
This may be a bit strange, but where is the business located, per se, the winery?
Go ahead. Sure.
Yeah. So the LLC. We currently produce the wines, where my husband's also the GM and winemaker up at Barnett Vineyards. We've been making our wines up there for 7 years now. And the LLC is currently held in our second bedroom in our home, where we can't taste. and we'd like to use that second bedroom as a bedroom eventually. So that's where the LLC is actually held. We do all computer sales right now, and the objective is to find a place where we can actually grow our direct-to-consumer sales, so we're not selling completely.
So your
wholesale.
tax situs right now is in town?
Yes,
and the tax situs will remain in town?
Absolutely.
Okay. I know I can't make that a requirement, but nonetheless, it's an interest.
Right.
Just because it'd be nice to have businesses in town generate tax revenue for the town.
Absolutely. And at this point, because we are majority wholesale, a lot of that, we don't collect sales tax. So this would shift more of that to local tax.
Well, if it goes out, if it's shipped out of town or out, it goes to the.
We ship wholesale.
Yeah.
So,
but even if you didn't, we wouldn't get the sales tax. The sales tax gets paid at the point of delivery.
But if we're selling here in town.
But if you're selling directly here, if the buyer takes it with them here, but if you ship it away, then we don't get the sales tax.
Absolutely, but we do have the we don't even have the option to sell here now. Yeah. So that would change that.
Unless they wanted it shipped, but yeah.
Yep.
I mean,
I realize that.
Yeah.
Anything else you'd like to say?
One of the things that we thought about by putting the locally owned there is that there has been a lot of talk, and we were speaking to people about corporations coming in and a lot of money here going back to corporations, and we just wanted to put special emphasis on the fact that the company literally is the two of us right here. And so that's why the emphasis was there, was because when we did talk to people, and we were out talking to people about this business, they said, well, they're a little bit concerned with all the corporations coming into town, so we're not corporate.
And you'll be washing the glasses and stuff in the dishwasher.
I think that's...
No, absolutely. No,
that's a fine sales pitch for presenting the project. I think it's an inappropriate basis for the commission to make a finding.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right.
Yes, I'll be washing all the glassware. I'm really good at it. Anything else?
I'd like to open public comment. Is there any public comment?
Can I go ahead and give my comments publicly?
Oh, that's...
Oh, I was just answering.
That's what I asked you if you had any more to say.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I do. Just as I mentioned previously, Tate is a business that my husband and I started 7 years ago with a small 450 cases. We now make 1,000 cases annually. It is my full-time position. Hopefully one day will be David's as well. We're a self-funded project, kind of doing the way Napa Valley used to be done, where a couple used to come into town and be able to make a business grow. Up to this point, we have not taken funding from a single person, something that we're very proud of. So a lot of people think that we're just starting out, and this is actually, we're going to our 5th release, our 7th harvest, and we now have the ability to put our money into a business location downtown, and one that we've been noticing over the past couple of years has been vacant, and we think we can really add to the downtown culture, business-wise. This business office was very important for us for it to be walking distance to our home, so I won't be adding to the traffic by putting another car on the road to go to a business. And we feel, as locals here, that we will really keep with the integrity of the city and do everything we can to promote other St. Helena businesses and the culture downtown. So, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any public comment? Public comment? Are you going to...
Just like to follow up on what my boss was talking about. I've been a resident here for 10 years. It's been an absolute pleasure. But I'm very proud to live in St. Helena. And to say that we do 100% Napa is one thing, but our St. Helena AVA growth is happening in our wine production as well. We are currently at 30%, but we would like to continue to grow that portion of it. For her to be able to walk to work, to be part of this town again as part of the community downtown in the commerce area, would be very proud to do that as well. Our wine, it's kind of interesting to listen to the construction comments on Spring Street. 3 of our wines are actually called Spring Street, and it's because we are on Spring Street. We're proud that we came up with this idea 7 years ago on Spring Street to start this label. And so we're proud to call 3 of our wines Spring Street. So we look to you to help approve this permit so that we can continue to grow our self-funded little wine label and be part of downtown St. Helena. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I have a clarification question. We're moving from office use to additional usage, and can you point to examples where we've done that before, Director Hausch?
Obviously, office uses as an industry are actually declining. Office real estate prices, maybe not in St. Helena, but generally are going down. The new business type is a mobile office, right? You see all the shared office spaces. People don't actually use offices as much or as similar as they used to. But for a local example, there was an item that came before the commission maybe a year and a half ago now, and it's in the small kind of office park directly across from the pizza place and the cleaners and the gas station and Goose and Gander. So in that small office park, there was a very similar application where there was an existing winery office that proposed to add tasting, and that was approved by the commission about a year and a half ago. No other examples are jumping to my mind, but it is an interesting transition in the economy as folks are kind of utilizing mobile office technology, phones, computers, those types of things. Traditional office spaces are changing, and I expect to see more of those types of changes coming before the commission.
Thank you.
I had another comment too, a question actually. It mentions getting the appropriate licensing in here for that. Can you have you communicated with the alcohol beverage? That's what you're talking about. Okay.
That process is
okay.
not complete yet.
Okay.
So the transition we primarily want it as a business office, like I said, so I can move all my file work and everything.
Right. Will you please come up to the podium to speak?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Now, public comment's been closed. Bobby, you should not question people in the audience after we've already closed public comment.
Okay, well, I just had that question. Sorry.
You're fine.
Yeah. Well, I did want to answer to that question.
Well, no, I'm not going to reopen it. I think we've discussed enough of it.
It is worth noting any alcohol permit is referred to the city by ABC, and we have to document whether they have a use permit, they've been approved, if their use is permitted, those types of things. So there is a kind of a checks and balances.
Any more comments?
Well, I have one more, and this is just a sort of personal. It might even be as trivial as a pet peeve, but
a lesser comment.
In the conditions of approval, there is reference to the 75% grape source requirement. I'm not at all convinced that in the city of St. Helena that requirement would pass a dormant commerce clause challenge. It troubles me, but I know it's part of our ordinance and that the condition belongs in the permit. So that's just me going on the record there.
Are we commenting on this right now? That's all right. Okay, I guess, well, I'll just say this. My mother was in Little Theater, and she used to do up in Dry Town in the Gold Country. She would do some, she'd be in the melodrama every summer. And I know that Dry Town was this tiny one-block town, and it at one time had 42 bars. And the number 10 on the findings talks about, granting the use permit would not set a precedent for the approval of similar uses. And I mean, I think it does, but I'm finally coming to accept that St. Helena is going to be a lot like Dry Town was when I was a kid. There are so many bars and tasting rooms, and I mean, if you consider a tasting room a bar, there are so many places in this town where you can be served alcohol. And I'm not criticizing it. I'm just learning to accept that that's the situation here. So I was going to bring that up, but I think that that's where we live, and that's what it's going to be like, at least in the near future, that we're going to have more and more tasting rooms around the town. We don't seem to have any discussion about putting a cap on that. So I'm just in light of finding number 10. I'm just, commenting on that.
Commissioner Monette, are you sure that's not Wet Town?
I know, that was the irony.
Let me tell her, I just saw the play that they put on at the Rionda House, and this town was all full of bordellos, bars, and I can't remember the third thing, David, but
we're heading back. We're headting back to the good old days.
Okay, that's it. Return to the future.
There were more bars then than there are tasting rooms now.
Okay.
All right. Can I have a motion, please?
I move that we accept staff direction on this item.
Second.
Is that how I'm supposed to say it? As modified. As modified.
Second. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Monette?
Yes.
Chair Kistner?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hardy?
Yes.
Commissioner Knudsen?
Yes.
Commissioner Pont?
Yes.
Thank you and good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sorry, Skip.
That's all right. I forget it.
Okay. All right. I guess we're down to the protocol for committees, commissions, and boards and planning commission bylaws.
Thank you, Chair Kistner.
You're on, Mr. Crowe.
The item before the commission, item 6.1, is essentially just a review of St. Helena's protocols of committees, commissions, and boards, as well as the planning commission bylaws. In light of the recent changes to the commission, staff felt it was important to bring these documents forward, essentially to provide an opportunity for a discussion on how the protocols are implemented here at the commission, as well as the bylaws. As identified in the staff report, the Planning Commission is subject to these two adopted documents. As the bylaws, as the title suggests, the protocols, they're intended to provide general guidance on the role, structure, and function of all committees, commissions, and boards serving the city and its residents. They discuss membership and committee structure, meeting administration, Brown Act and conflict interest rules, establish general ground rules for how meetings to be run, and also identify committee standards of conduct. The bylaws are a little bit more specific to the Planning Commission, or much more specific to the Planning Commission. They were reviewed and approved by the Planning Commission and ultimately the City Council. And these include kind of the organization and election of officers, the schedule and agenda of individual meetings, and the conduct and voting during public hearings, as well as other miscellaneous provisions. And together they create the foundation for meeting management and process, as well as identifying the general expectations for committee or commission members, as well as staff. And so staff just wanted to provide an opportunity to point these out, make sure you're all aware of them. Please do read them. I'm just going to go through them briefly to hit some of the highlights. So the protocols themselves obviously have the role and purpose of all boards, commissions, and committees. There's a membership and committee structure, which identifies consists of a minimum of 5 and a maximum of 7, except for the Planning Commission, which only consists of 5 regular members. And you'll notice in those general provisions, there are some exceptions for the Planning Commission. There's residency requirements, as you're all aware of. You have to be a resident of St. Helena. There's membership terms, so commissioners, unlike other committee members, serve for 4-year terms, as you're all aware. You made a serious commitment when you signed up for this. It is interesting to note the committee officers, that you select a chairperson annually. And no member shall serve more than 2 consecutive years as the chair. I wanted to let Ms. Kistner know that, unless unless it's unanimously agreed upon by the committee in a sealed vote and approved by the City Council. So there's a very specific process to allow more than 2 consecutive terms as the chair. Again, there's numerous things, but staff liaison, so I'm specifically designated as the liaison to the Planning Commission. My role is to assist you in understanding the city functions and requirements, such as state regulations, code requirements, conflict of interest, and Brown Act rules. So please do reach out to me anytime you have questions about those. There's some direction regarding providing a quarterly report to the City Council, which is pretty, I would say that's a relatively often report to the City Council, so we can maybe consider having a discussion as to how often that happens, or maybe it's the commission would like.
I think they just recently said, Noah, that they wanted it once a year from all of the chairs.
Great. So that quarterly is a little bit excessive. We have not done it traditionally, and then just recently we did one presentation to the council. Ms. Kistner presented to the council. There's some specifics about professionalism and meeting behaviors. There's the ground rules, which obviously are included in the packet. Just a couple of them just ask that people stay on topic, that one person speaks at a time, and that there's no side conversations, texting, or cell phone use. So obviously these have been updated at some point in the near future or in the recent future. They reference cell phones and texting. And then it goes on to provide the structure of the agenda, and then standards of conduct. There's responsibilities, committee behavior norms. One thing the multiple members of the commission will remember that when there's an individual commissioner asking for something, staff often asks for a vote from the entire commission as to whether they support that individual request, and that's in response to this committee and staff relationship and conduct on page 197, and it identifies that staff works for the entire commission as a body, not individual commissioners, and so that's why staff does seek that general consensus.
Which letter? Which letter?
B. So committee, staff relationships, and conduct, B. Also, E is important to read from the staff perspective, which requests that commissioners shall make every effort to avoid surprising staff during public meetings. And you all are doing a great job of providing your questions, and staff does very much appreciate it. And then also you'll see occasionally staff will take a question and an answer and provide it to the entire commission, and that's to ensure that you all have access to the same information in your decision making. And staff does really seek to try to do that. And that's generally what the general protocols are. And then moving on to the bylaws, as I mentioned, it's organization and election, schedule of meetings, the process to cancel a meeting, which I would like to talk to you about in a moment with the department report. And then it has the meeting procedures. So Rule 15 is kind of the general procedures of the meeting. Obviously, we're supposed to end by 10 p.m., which we do a great job of. Talks about comment letters being provided that would come in after, that being provided at the dais, which we've done, and you all are used to doing that, and thank you for paying attention to those packets that are sitting on the dais when you show up, because that's information that we've gotten since we put together the report. And then Rule 21 is the procedure for individual items, and so this is always a good reminder for everyone, including staff, to just read as to how each item is gone. So the chairperson declares the public hearing open. Each commissioner declares ex parte communication, and at that point is also the time to announce any recusals, which you all did an excellent job of tonight, and I apologize for not reminding, but you all are generally well aware of those. Obviously, staff gives a report. The commission then asks staff for questions or clarifications. The applicant then gives their presentation, which is limited to a certain amount of time. The commission will acknowledge any written testimony that shows up that we talked about. We let the public testimony comments occur. It's 3 minutes per person, although the chair does have the opportunity to shorten that if there's a large item or there's other extenuating circumstances.
Extend it.
Or extend it, thank you. And then obviously that then allows the applicant and or the staff to respond to those comments. So it's always good to circle back if public comments were received that raise additional questions or needs additional clarification. Circle back to staff. If staff can't answer or we feel it's more appropriate for the applicant to, we will defer to them. Then the hearing is closed. The Planning Commission debates. And they call for a vote. There's a definition of ex parte communication. It's important to be aware of what that is. I think you all are well aware of that. And it's also important to note Rule 23, the applicants may request a withdrawal or a continuance on any item, so that's a codified rule that we have. And then Rule 32, there's numerous things in there, but that you all shall decide for yourselves whether there's a conflict of interest. Staff can obviously provide some additional help in how you make that determination and help you answer any questions, but it is ultimately your decision when there is a conflict, so it's important to know. So that concludes my presentation. I think it may be beneficial to allow each commissioner to kind of speak to these if there's any issues that commissioners are noticing that we're not following, or people would like to emphasize certain things that are identified in these. I think this is a good time to do that.
I have a couple, and
Your microphone, Chair Kistner.
I thought I was going home. We went back and forth with the people out here tonight, and we're not supposed to do that. And we did it on several occasions. When they come up here, we can ask them, but we're not supposed to be yelling back and forth at the group out there, or letting them yell back and forth at us. Mm-hmm. And if that happens again, I didn't do it tonight. Other than the very end, I will call us on that.
Okay.
So if they
Yes,
have
ma'am.
questions. If you have questions, you want to go through Noah to ask them. And we've traditionally done that.
Did you have more?
I beg your pardon?
Did you have more? Because I have a couple of things.
Go right ahead.
Oh, okay. Rule number 22 says, opponents and proponents shall be given equal opportunity for presentation. If that's true, and I think it should be, Rule 21H, we need to add something here, because the applicant or the staff response to new information or questions raised by public testimony, if it's going to be equal, then the other people should have time, the opponents should have time to respond to the applicant's response if new information or something else comes up there. Do you see what I'm saying? The public should be able to respond to new information or questions raised during applicant response.
In that context, I think opponents and proponents are generally members of the public, so the 3-minute rule.
Well, I know it, but I know the public is limited to 3, but just in terms of having equal time, the public gets up and talks, the applicant comes and talks, the public gets up and talks, the applicant gets to rebut. In order to have equal, I think the public should again have another chance to come up with their 3-minute limit to speak to the last rebuttal of the applicant in order to have equal time. Otherwise, it's not equal at all. So we should change either Rule 22 or add something to Rule 21 in order to make them consistent, because I find them inconsistent.
Are you saying of the protocols or?
Of the, well, right
Which
here
page
on
are you
page 201, 200 and 201.
Right.
Conduct a public hearing.
If I may, I think you're confusing applicant with proponent.
I don't think she's confusing that. I think she's saying something different. But I think the problem is, Bobby, that, or at least the reason I disagree with you is that in my experience, the new information that this rule or protocol gives the applicant an opportunity to respond to is almost invariably new information presented by members of the public. Correct. In the course of their 3-minute or however long they are presentations. So
well, if that's the case, then the response might be new information too, because they would be responding to new information.
Well, that's true, but
if you go that way, then you're going to.
You can generate an endless cycle.
That's right. That's
of
exactly
comments
what I
and
was saying.
responses. So I think. Let me finish.
Sorry.
I think the basic format that is employed, not universally, but certainly widely, and I think it's reflected, however perfectly or not, in the rule, is the applicant makes a presentation, the neighbors, opponents, however we characterize them, make their comments, and the applicant gets a rebuttal. And that's the end.
I understand, and that's an odd number. I am just saying make it an even number. You can cut it off at 4, but make it an even number.
No, I understand what you're saying.
And I know there's been
just disagreeing with the appropriateness of
okay, well, part of the reason I'm saying it is there's been a lot of public dissent and anger and feelings of frustration because it seems lopsided. Applicant goes and the public goes, applicant, and there's no time, new information there for the public to have the last one. Then each one has had 2 times. I understand that it could go on and on and on. But anyway, I think it would be much fairer.
I think when the kinds of issues that generate a lot of friction or frustration with the adequacy of the public comment period. I think when that's going on, what you're looking at is not a meeting that needs to be extended for sir rebuttal and sir rebuttal and so on.
Right.
It's a meeting that needs to be continued so that people have the opportunity to process the additional information and everyone comes back.
But then the vote is taken. I mean, that's the problem. And I'm hearing what you're saying. And
what I'm saying is that those sound like meetings where no vote should be taken.
Oh, well, that's I've never seen that happen.
Well, it does happen.
The
Public
lot
hearings
lines
get continued.
The lot line adjustment for the medium density parcel with the ag parcel may be a good example of that.
Yeah, and I guess then, if we keep it the way it is, I think we should take out that sentence then, because to me, equal time means equal time. 1, 2, 1, 2.
Is that in the planning commission,
It needs
or is
clarification
that in the protocol?
that members of the public get equal time.
Who wrote that?
As opposed to
who wrote
the
that?
public and applicants.
Just tell me who it is. I'll go talk to him.
I think we did recently update these bylaws, and this issue was discussed at that time, and the commission voted to approve this draft. But I'm not seeing what you're saying in Rule 22.
Well, maybe I could offer a clarification there.
Go ahead.
The clarification, it says, Bobby, this is what you, Commissioner Monette, this is what is stated here. Opponents and proponents shall be given equal opportunity for presentation. This isn't about equal time. This is
I'm
about
not equal opportunity.
This is equal opportunity.
Same number of turns.
I don't think that's what we're trying to say here. And I think I might agree with Vice Chair Hardy that if it's so contentious that the public is begging for further opportunity to speak, I think it makes sense to continue it.
I agree with that. If in that case, I think we should put that in there, because that doesn't happen, and this happens over and over again, not just here, but at the city council meetings as well. And people are, when there's an appeal, and people have really feel shortchanged because it's about the number of turns you have.
I don't think we can
go on and on,
codify sensitivity. I just don't think that works. You can't. We can't write a requirement that the chair be sensitive to the degree of tension in the conduct of the hearing. That's not going to work.
That makes sense.
I think that has been missing in certain moments in recent history, and I'm not talking about the Planning Commission necessarily, but
both. If the shoe fits.
I'm sure that's been an issue, but I also think it's worth recognizing that with this rule applied strictly, an applicant may have, say, if we adhere to time limits pretty closely, about 15 minutes, 10 minutes at the beginning, and maybe 5 minutes at the end. And an organized group of neighbors can have easily half an hour with 10 people speaking 3 minutes each. So
or less.
Or less. It all depends. But the structure we have doesn't necessarily give an applicant time at the microphone equal to the time that project opponents have. So I think we've got a system that works.
A perfect example was the lot line adjustment we just had last year, where the guy went back and worked with the neighbors, and we heard it again.
That was beautiful.
The problems that we have in the public process aren't problems stemming from the rule. They're problems stemming from the relationship between the public, the decision makers, and the decision. And that's a different kind of problem, and no rule change will fix it.
I just think that this isn't clear. This feels like a contradiction to me. It feels inconsistent to me, and I would like to see it changed. If it's going to be changed in the direction that you guys want, that you guys seem to favor, fine, but then take out the language that at least makes me feel that these two things are incompatible. They're not consistent.
Yeah, I don't feel they're incompatible, and we just discussed them.
Well, if no one defines what opportunity is. That's not defined. And I interpret it as new information comes out, new rebuttal to new information, then if that brings up something, and it may not, but if it does bring up something new for someone, that they should have the opportunity to respond to it, and then that would be the end. Two turns.
I think we already have that opportunity, because if we want to reopen public comment, the chair can reopen public comment.
Well, I know it, but that rarely happens. But if it were part of the protocol, it would be more likely. It could happen. But I've rarely seen that happen.
Well, I don't think you can run everything by a tight rule. This is
trying to make these consistent.
Well, I think they're compatible.
I'm not getting any support here, so that's all right. I'll back off.
I don't think you're getting any support.
No. I'm getting used to that, but that's okay.
Any comments, John?
No questions.
How about you? Lester, I think we've commented, and Bobby's commented.
I'm just curious. Are you guys curious that rules 33, 34, and 35 sort of negates the whole thing? I mean, you don't have to pay attention to them if there are ways to, which is fine with me. I'm not. It just seems like there's.
That's legal protection that was inserted by the city attorney to make sure that we don't get ourselves in a lawsuit.
How does that? Can you explain more?
Well, you wouldn't want someone to point out a commission-adopted bylaw as used to justify a invalidation of an action that was taken by the planning commission.
Well, they do that at the city council level. It seems like there are no consequences to breaking the rules. But I'm not arguing with it. I just thought it was.
Most boards or commissions have the authority on an individual case-by-case basis to decide to break their own bylaws in the review of certain projects, and it's specifically to address some of the things that your concerns are raising. So it gives the chair the opportunity to expand on the amount of time that's provided to commenters. It's intended to build flexibility into the process, which we were looking for in earlier discussion on one of the items.
And because of the way I feel about transparency, I probably let a lot of people talk more than 3 minutes.
But you don't let public comment be open.
To talk.
You rarely let public comment be reopened once it's closed.
Which is right. Thank you, Director Hausch, for guiding us through this. It's never going to be perfect. I think it's pretty good, and I appreciate your effort to review with us, because I know, sometimes I may step on someone else's speaking, and I'd like to say if I do that, I'm sorry. I'll try not to in the future, but thank you for reminding me of that.
No worries.
All right.
Thank you.
Any departmental reports?
Briefly, so we had talked about potentially canceling the meeting of November 21st. That is Tuesday before Thanksgiving? It is the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. It seems like that would be a good opportunity to cancel meetings. In my experience in this community and others, if decisions are made on dates close to holidays, people tend to be frustrated by that. So I would recommend that date be canceled, but obviously it's up to the commission. And I would request a vote today so we can codify it and we can let people know if the commission so desires.
So moved.
Second.
Do we have any discussion? Doesn't it depend
Have a
on
roll
what's
call,
up?
please.
Wait a second. There has to be discussion.
We can schedule items around it. So it could result in delay on an individual project. But again, if an applicant is delayed a couple weeks, but it makes the community makes a decision more palatable to the community, staff finds that that's a benefit.
Roll call,
I think we
please.
should wait until the time to decide.
Vice Chair Hardy?
Yes.
Chair Kistner?
Yes.
Commissioner Pont?
Yes.
Commissioner Monette?
Yes.
Commissioner Knudsen?
Yes.
Thank you very much. And then also we traditionally cancel the first meeting of the year, which is January 2nd, 2018, and I apologize for talking about 2018 in September, but I am a planner.
Oh, heck yes. So moved.
Sober up, right?
So that one has been tradition, and we don't have to do that tonight, but just know that we do plan on canceling that. And then you'll see that staff has updated the agenda forecast to reflect the Planning Commission's prioritization of the project list. So please review that, and please do feel free to add or point out other areas in the zoning code that need to be included in that. Staff has started the review of the zoning code. How I'm anticipating that process to go also we'll have some kind of check-ins with the commission to get direction on certain items, while we're also reviewing for general cleanup issues, so inconsistencies, and we will bring back the modified zoning code to identify the inconsistencies that we're recommending be cleaned up. It'll be a red line, strike through, so all changes will be able to be identified by the commission. And then we can take individual topics such as floor area ratio and individual items. We'll do those as kind of workshops with the commission, hoping to get direction on those that we bring back then, the finalized draft of the entire document. That's how we're considering now. We'll schedule an item in the future to get additional input on the overall work plan and how the process to go, but just to give you some general idea of how staff's anticipating tackling that.
How far in advance of any public hearing will we get copies of what your changes are?
Well, so it's my goal that the changes are kind of iterative. So we work on the changes throughout the months ahead, and then the final document will be so they'll be identified throughout the months as the commission directs those changes in bite-sized pieces. So the floor area ratio, for example. Maybe some of the other issues, the allowed uses in the Service Commercial Central Business District, and we'll take those bite sizes, and those will be incorporated into a document that the commission sees every meeting and the public sees every meeting, with those changes being made gradually per section.
So we won't get them on a Friday and have to do anything with them on the following Tuesday.
That's absolutely right.
We'll have more time.
We're not going to get an agenda a week in advance like the councilors.
Well, I thought that may be brought up by the Planning Commission.
I just brought it up.
So the council has asked for an additional week in their review of individual items. It frankly provides a little bit more logistical problems for Planning Commission items, and I believe it does City Council, because most Planning Commission items are generated by applications, not by council direction. So it is somewhat challenging. I'm happy to have a discussion of that, but staff cannot commit to that right now. What we do anticipate doing for any larger projects, and I apologize for how the CIA project was presented to the commission because the volume of information was staggering compared to the amount of time. Any larger projects, we definitely will get you that with significantly more time to review, but staff cannot commit to giving that extra time today. If there's an interest from the commission, we can discuss it and talk about kind of pros and cons and the challenges it would present to staff, so the commission is fully informed should they make that decision.
What about the idea that we were going to have not just get the materials well in advance, but actually have a hearing before the hearing for a decision, so that we could hear public
Well, I think that's
idea?
Next thing I was going to ask you. The council's goal setting is on October the 4th.
The 4th, that's correct.
Where is it and what time?
I don't know.
Would you?
I will find out and let you know. That's correct, yeah.
Because that's on their agenda.
Oh, okay. So we'll get an answer then.
I know that's on their agenda because we've talked about it.
A couple of things, if I could, Madam Chair. First, on the zoning code changes, you're going to do a call and response format. So a portion comes here for review, we review it, we make suggestions, then those suggestions will come back to us at the next meeting?
Exactly.
Okay, good. I don't want to have the same screw-up that happened with the general plan. Second thing, and we don't seem to have an information-only item available on the agenda, but I think the changes coming up, because it does look like he's going to sign at least some of those bills in that package, that we get the League or the CSAC digest on it, so we can start thinking about how this is going to affect what we do and how we do it. So I don't know if we do information items only, but that would be perfect for that kind of thing, rather than sit here an hour and try to plow through that stuff.
We can definitely do that. Staff, myself, Senior Planner Heacock, and Ms. Bianco are all attending the American Planning Association conference, which starts on Saturday. And I always go to the legislative update. I'm anticipating that will be very substantive this year, and so I will bring back information for the commission that I'll email out and share with you.
Okay. Last thing is, I think the chair had requested at some point a few weeks ago that at each meeting you do an update on the general plan and where we are. So I'm very interested to hear how the RFP for the EIR is going.
I plan to issue that by October 1st. So one of the next items I was going to talk about is that the Hunter EIR RFP has been published. That's on the street now. The due date for that is October 16th for responses. The general plan EIR RFP will be issued by October 1st, and I plan to, while I'm at the conference, let as many qualified environmental consultants know as possible that those two documents are on the street so we get a broad response and we can have a good menu of folks to choose from.
Just as a suggestion, Noah, every RFP I've written has had the scoring procedure for it in the RFP. I would suggest that speed be a consideration. I don't know what kind of point structure you're setting up, but the faster rather than the slower on this one. So I would appreciate to see that actually built into the scoring procedure.
Yes. Well noted, and it was intended to do that.
All right, do we have an agenda forecast?
Just to identify that it's been updated to reflect the prioritization of the projects, and one of those projects being the design guidelines, similar to the, the zoning code update is a little bit more, we'll have iterative processes. The design guidelines, staff plans on putting together a work plan to bring before the commission so you can understand exactly, and the public, to understand the entire process for how that will go before it starts. The number of workshops, get input from the commission if you want more or less workshops. We're thinking right now having multiple meetings during multiple times of the day to allow all different parts of the community to participate. We plan on reaching out to different community groups that we know will be interested, the Historical Society being one of them, that we can engage with those groups directly, go to their meetings, present to them directly, in addition to having general workshops with the public. Staff would also like to engage with some of our local design professionals to try to capture some of their expertise and professionalism to at least provide a review of it and comment that then the commission could consider, because this is what they do every day. So local architects and those types of folks to kind of provide some input on those draft guidelines before they get codified. But the work plan will be the first step. The commission will see the entire process. The public will see the entire process. Not obviously specific dates, but the number of meetings, kind of how it's intended to go. And the commission can provide feedback as to how that can be input, changed, modified, expanded, and then we will start setting dates for the workshops and those types of things. We intended to have some design charrettes, kind of meetings where people can go to different tables, provide different input. We want to get a lot of input from the community before we even start to draft them. And we've had some internal meetings. I'm very excited about this. I think it has an opportunity to really get the community excited, engage them on a project that will provide community-wide benefit when it's not a specific development project. So I think people can really have some fun with it, and that's my intention.
I think it's also going to show. It's also going to show that we're serious about having some transparency about what's going on.
Yes, 100%.
I think that's very important.
And that's one of my my most prioritized elements. As I've worked here for almost 3 years now, I've tried to engage the community more and more on all the development projects that we've had, setting up processes such as neighborhood meetings, expanding the noticing requirements, all those things. It works out to have a better project, and I think we've seen some of the results of that when the community can listen and the commission gives direction to the applicants, and the more we can do that, the better.
I think so.
And I'm sorry, you had one question?
I was just thinking that ultimately what we vote on is a recommendation.
Council ultimately will adopt the guidelines, that's correct.
Meeting is adjourned.